Wide receiver rankings are all over the board. So today we're going to bring you our tiered wide receiver rankings for the top 39 wide receivers so that you have a plan of attack, whether you're heading into a draft now or you don't draft all the way until August. And we're going to start in the S tier. And Ty and I actually had a little discussion about who belongs in the S tier before we even got into this. Last year, it felt pretty easy. This year, we're already having arguments. And Ty, you kind of said you think that this first guy, Jamar Chase, belonged in the S tier alone. Why were you saying that?
You just take a look at last year, and the guy averaged like 5 fantasy points per game more than the next like full-time player that was Justin Jefferson. Obviously, like Chris Godwin was 4 points behind him on 7 games. Puka Nacua was that 8 point, or it's not 8 points, excuse me, 5 points per game in 11 games. Like Jamar Chase last year was levels above any other receiver. And I don't want to say that we can expect the same with Jamar Chase, but the dude got paid. This Cincinnati offense is relatively unchanged. And probably the biggest reason for Jamar Chase's success last year was because Cincinnati's defense couldn't stop anybody, so they needed to rely on their offense to win games. I don't know if they really made like substantial improvements on their defense to take the ball out of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase's hands. So I still believe that Jamar Chase is kind of the cream of the crop of it. Like when we talk about probably the next like 9, maybe even up to 11 receivers, they are all very good wide receivers and wide receiver ones to have on your team. But like you give yourself an edge when you have a Jamar Chase.
For sure. And I mean, you nailed it right on the head. I mean, he had the triple crown last year, 127 receptions, 1,708 yards, 17 touchdowns. That feels pretty untouchable. The reason I pushed back, the reason that I made the graphic, so it went my way, right? I had the final say. I got a surprise Ty with a little bit how these worked or looked today. But the reason I add these other two is because in 2023, CeeDee Lamb also put up 23.7 fantasy points per game. In 2022, Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver one, put up 22.1 fantasy points per game. Obviously, we're looking in the past, but that's why I gave these guys the benefit of the doubt to belong in the S tier as well as Jamar Chase. Also, when I'm in a draft, I feel okay substituting Jefferson, CD, Jamar, like going any of those directions. Whereas once we get past that, I feel a little more hesitant taking one of those wide receivers ahead of these three. Justin Jefferson last year, it was supposed to be a down year, right? But I think he's proven, if anything, he's pretty QB proof. I mean, he had 103 receptions, 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns. Obviously, Sam Darnold played well. Like it wasn't like it was bad quarterback play. But, back in 2023, he had bad quarterback play, still played well. JJ McCarthy this year, Ty, are you worried at all, or are you kind of buying into that QB proof? I mean, he's your wide receiver 3, my wide receiver 2. So I would assume you are, but are you a little hesitant with Justin Jefferson?
I guess it'll depend on exactly like where he's going to go in drafts, because if he's kind of pushing top 3 pick, if I'm not mistaken, like he is right now over on Underdog, I don't. It sounds crazy to say that I'm hesitant, but I'm like, I don't know if I can guarantee that he's going to be one of the top 3 skill position players because of the rookie quarterback. He can still be a top 5 wide receiver, and it's still going to be a really, really good season. But in terms of like the frustrations that you can have during a year, I think you may have some with Justin Jefferson. And again, that's all stemming just from an inexperienced quarterback. We've seen it. We've seen this offense work, like you said, with Sam Darnold with an unproven track record. So quite literally a no track record quarterback going into this offense. Honestly, you shouldn't have any quarrels. But like if we're talking about Jefferson as like the 7th or 8th pick, then I'm totally okay with it. And again, that's just nitpicking. That is like splitting hairs at that point.
For sure. And obviously, like I'm pretty comfortable with him as a top 4 pick. I have him as my wide receiver 2. The next player, CeeDee Lamb, we just have them flip-flopped. He's your wide receiver 2, my wide receiver 3. I think people forget when they look at, CeeDee Lamb, a little more of a disappointing season last year. But you have to remember, Dak Prescott missed the back half of the year, right? He played the back half of the year with Cooper Rush. And before Dak was out, he's averaging 18.5 fantasy points per game. He was wide receiver 6 in points per game. So I mean, he was playing well. He would have been the quarterback or the wide receiver 4, excuse me, in points per game last season if Dak had stayed healthy the entire time. So something to keep in mind. Do you think we could see CD return to 2023 numbers with Dak, or do you think that George Pickens kind of caps that ceiling a little bit for him?
There's a chance. I think anytime that you add, I mean, we have to just call a spade a spade. George Pickens is a substantial upgrade over Brandon Cooks.
Yes.
So that does have to matter in when you kind of evaluate and you kind of project what this Dallas Cowboys offense can be. But I still believe that like this offense is going to have to go through CeeDee Lamb because I don't believe you can with George Pickens. I don't believe you can with Javonte Williams and Jaden Blue and Miles Sanders in your backfield. This does have to still be a Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb offense. So I made a TikTok the other day talking about how the first round should look in a competitive league. And I had CeeDee Lamb one spot ahead of Jefferson. And I was like, I'm not, we're not going to debate you if you have it the other way around. Like, again, like you said, we have these guys flip-flopped in our own personal rankings. I just give the nod to CD because of pretty much what's established here in Dallas with Dak Prescott and Brian Schottenheimer, who again is not a head coach that we, have a lot of confidence in just because we are unfamiliar with Schottenheimer. But at least he's been there the last couple of years. So he's seen CeeDee Lamb go to work.
For sure. And I mean, when Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are on the field together, they put up fantasy points. Like you can't, there's no arguing it. CeeDee Lamb, his worst finish in 3 seasons last year, he was the wide receiver 8. Oh, I mean, he had Cooper Rush half the year. He's still the wide receiver 8. So really not much to argue. Before we go to the A tier, we want to invite you into the fellowship. We're making, we're putting out videos twice a week moving forward. We got the draft guide coming up in July. We're going to kick it up to 3 videos started in August going through the season. I know, Lucas is out this week, but usually he's streaming a best ball draft on Wednesday nights. So we got a lot coming out for you. So make sure you just hit that notification button, turn on those subscriptions. Maybe you have to do that the other way around, actually. But you understand what I'm saying, and I will stop blabbing, and we will go to the A tier. And this is where we also had the conversation. Should these 2 tiers be combined, right? We did have that conversation as well of how do you do should it just be Jamar Chase? Should it be the top 3? Or should we really have it be all these guys? And I really think that it is kind of like a tier 1B almost is how it feels a little bit. We have Puka Nacua firmly as the wide receiver 4. He was, if you want to debate that Puka should be in your S tier, you know what? I'm probably going to give it to you. The dude has been nothing but phenomenal since he entered the league. I mean, there has not been a down period at all for Puka. I mean, he came out, he had 35 targets in his first 2 games of his career. And since then, like you said, he was a wide receiver 3 in points per game and only 11 games. And that includes a game where he got ejected in the second quarter for throwing punches and had 2.1 points. I mean, the dude is just, I mean, he had 14, 13, 14. He had, what was that? 4 games with over 14 or with over 13 targets last year. I understand Devontae Adams is in town, but Ty, I mean, is there any reason that we should be thinking Puka's not going to keep getting better this year from what we've seen the last 2 seasons?
I don't doubt it. Why go against the grain a little bit? Maybe that's too simple of a way to put it, but when you think about the team moving on from Cooper Kupp, pretty much seems like a vote of confidence that Puka Nacua can be their guy moving forward. And even last year with the injuries, wide receiver 5 in usage. So wide receiver 4 is definitely not a stretch out of the imagination. Of course not. I mean, the dude finishes as a wide receiver 2 then the rest of the way. So Puka Nacua is an absolute stud. And him and the next guy pretty much, in my opinion, you could, if you wanted to do your own tiers, I would understand top 3, these next two, and then the three after in a tier below. So you go like 1A,
Yes.
1B, 1C. Like
Yes.
that's how it could break up.
For sure. And I mean, the last thing I'll add is some people are going to be, oh, but what about, Puka Nakua losing touchdowns to Devontae Adams? Okay. Puka Nakua has averaged 18 fantasy points a game for his career and has 9 total touchdowns in 28 games. He's not losing touchdowns. Like, right? There hasn't been touchdowns to begin with, and he has still been elite. I have no worries for Puka. I agree with you. You put him and Malik Neighbors, this next guy who's both of our wide receiver 5s in a tier of their own. You can move them up to S tier. Both phenomenal. And you want to talk about a guy who's probably quarterback proof. I mean, Malik Neighbors is up there. The fact that he had 170 targets in 15 games last year with what the Giants were putting out in the field should tell you everything you need to know, because you know how many offensive weapons they brought in this year? Cam Scattaboo, and that's it. Right? Nobody who's going to challenge. Yeah, exactly. Nobody who's going to challenge Malik Neighbors for targets. We could see him push 200 targets this year. I mean, that is not out of the realm of possibilities, because he was almost on pace for that last season. They bring in Jackson Dart, Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson starts, an upgrade from what we saw last year. If Jackson Dart starts, at worst, he's still better than what we saw last year out of the Giants quarterback position. And Malik Neighbors had 109 receptions, 1,200 targets. Do you think that bad quarterback play holds him back from wide receiver 1 overall upside? Or did you see enough last year where you're like, I don't care what the quarterback is, I think he's going to get enough volume where he could do it?
I don't want to. It feels kind of funny, goofy, maybe, to put that up against the wide receiver 1 from last year in Ja'Marr Chase, like you said, the Triple Crown winner, and the stats that he put up like that. I don't know if he can necessarily get that with, again, a Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, or Jameis Winston if he gets in for whatever reason. I don't know if he can get there with that kind of quarterback play. I mean, Ja'Marr Chase obviously has Joe Burrow throwing him the ball, so that helps. But that being said, like, the reason why I had really Ja'Marr Chase in the tier of his own, and then from Jefferson to Amon-Ra in their own tiers, because I was like, I feel like any one of those guys could be the next guy behind Ja'Marr Chase. Yep. Like, that is, and again, for Neighbors, the reason why he could be the wide receiver 2 is not because he has elite quarterback play for him. It's just going from awful to average quarterback play. And that's probably going to be the theme that you're going to hear this year from us and a lot of other people, is you don't need to go from bad to good in 1 year. If you just go from bad, or maybe even awful, dead last in a lot of statistics, to just average, it makes a difference. So for Neighbors, for being, again, last year, wide receiver 7 in points per game with the quarterback situation that he had, if he just has slightly better, we could see him crack the top 5, even the top 3 then.
Yeah, I mean, and that, like, we're talking about quarterback play getting better. Malik Neighbors is going to get better himself too. Like, you factor that in on top of it, and that's where you really see the jump. But like you said, he's wide receiver 6 last year. He was half a point a game behind Justin Jefferson. I mean, the dude's already elite. He's already arrived. Brian Thomas Jr., my wide receiver 6, your wide receiver 7, the guy next to him, Nico Collins, is my wide receiver 7, your wide receiver 6. So obviously we have them flip-flopped. But Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver 4 overall. He only had 16.7 fantasy points per game. I should say only, which was, down at the wide receiver 12 when you factor in guys like Chris Godwin, who missed time, Nico Collins missing time, T. Higgins missing time. But again, I mean, as a rookie on that Jacksonville offense that was pretty much dumpster fire as well last season, that's pretty great. He had Mac Jones most of the year. I have heard a lot of people saying they're worried about Brian Thomas because at the end of the year was so great because he was hyper targeted by Mac Jones, and they don't know if we're going to see that this season. Is that a concern to you, or does Liam Cohen coming over and installing his offense kind of negate that concern?
It negates it. I think, again, there is something to be said about just being force-fed targets because you're the only good thing going in an offense in a bad situation. But I think a lot of people don't realize that Liam Cohen in this being hired by Jacksonville is not only trying to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence, but looking at the skill that they have and the talent that they have in Brian Thomas Jr., and then added with Travis Hunter and saying, okay, offense needs to dominate here. And you've got playmakers to do so now. And I think a lot of people still hold on to the stigma that Brian Thomas Jr. is just a deep threat, that he's only a vertical big play type player. And what he showed with Jacksonville last year in a bad situation is that he's so much more than that. There's a lot of after the catch stuff. There's a lot of speed across the middle of the field. All of that stuff is what Liam Cohen is going to put on notice. And it's funny to say on notice because it was on notice last year. And now he's getting the upgrade in play caller and scheme where he's going to be able to thrive even more. So again, I think there's just a stigma of Brian Thomas Jr. relatively being unknown and still people thinking that he's a vertical guy when in reality, he is so much more than that.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the Jacksonville effect of playing down there. You kind of get buried a little. And no matter what you think of Trevor Lawrence, he is a better quarterback than Mac Jones. Flat out he is. There's a reason he's still starting. There's a reason that people still believe in him. And yeah, I'm not saying like Liam Cohen's going to necessarily unlock this offense, but I do think it's going to be pretty pass friendly. And the fact that Tampa Bay threw the ball over 600 times last year, I think Brian Thomas could find 150 of those targets this season. Nico Collins missed a little bit of time last year, only played 12 games, still put up 17.6 fantasy points per game. Still incredibly efficient with CJ Stroud, almost a 70% catch rate, which for a vertical guy is pretty insane. But yeah, CJ Stroud, especially to start the season before the injury for Nico, showed this is my guy. I'm going to go to him in every situation, and he's going to put up a lot of points. And that's exactly what he did. In the first 5 weeks, his worst game was Buffalo, and he had 78 receiving yards on 2 catches. He played 13% of snaps that game. Other than that, he had 86 yards against Minnesota. All 3 other games over 115 yards. Was still pretty good over the back half of the season, double-digit points in all but 2 games. Ties, I guess I've been asking this for a lot of guys. Are we starting to get to the edge of, I don't know if this guy can be wide receiver 1 or even wide receiver 2 anymore, or is Nico Collins still kind of in the range with Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua ahead of him?
See, it's funny because I think the best way to say it is that he has that type of upside, but what keeps him in this, again, if you want to group these 3, Brian Thomas, Nico, and Amon-Ra together, is the fact that like this is slightly going to be a different Houston offense than what we've seen, at least from last year. Like, obviously, you went out and hired Nick Caley after letting Bobby Slowick go, which I think the jury is out to say if that's a improvement, that's an upgrade. But what we do know is that we're getting a branch of the McVay offense now in Houston, but it's still just relatively unproven. The team then went out and tried to do what they can to like improve the offensive line, because that was honestly probably the biggest struggle for them last year. That's what caused CJ Stroud to not really take a sophomore leap. Cam Robinson, Titus Howard, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs, and Blake Fisher, with Laken Tomlinson and Trenton Brown and Ed Ingram then as like rotation guys if the starters don't work out. And on top of that, even like probably the biggest reason, they added Jaden Higgins. They added Jalen Noel. They traded for Christian Kirk. This is arguably a more crowded wide receiver room than what it was last year when we had Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. Yeah. So there's downside with Nico Collins in the sense that, like, not that he gets lost in the mix, but other factors around him do hold him back from really jumping up into the upper echelons of wide receiver 1s. But again, I want to say he still has the upside, because for all we know, it literally could be the CJ Stroud, Nico Collins show again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really don't have a reason to doubt that it will be. Like I think CJ Stroud has shown, hey, he's my guy. I go to him in every situation. This last guy in this tier, Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 3 overall last year. He's been nothing but great the last couple seasons. Is this just hedging your bet a little bit on the fact that Ben Johnson's out of town and they just have so many mouths to feed? Because that's really what it is for me, that he's at the end of this tier. I still think he has great upside. I'm still taking him first round of drafts. I just move him to the edge of this tier as kind of like just being a little cautious when looking at Amon-Ra.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to say it. Cautious kind of has a negative connotation to it, but I really just think it's when you look at upside in Brian Thomas and Nico Collins, I think they have just a bit more than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Not saying that he doesn't have a ceiling, but offensive change could happen. And I'll be honest too, Jameson Williams has gotten better every single year, and we saw that he kind of overtook Sam Laporta as kind of that number 2 option in the passing game. And if you get another step from Jameson Williams, is he not going to command more targets then? And again, that makes it sound like Amon-Ra St. Brown is like going to fall down the depth chart. That's not happening. Mm-hmm. But if we just continue to see the same type of usage out of Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't know exactly what kind of upside then that he brings that a Nico Collins and a Brian Thomas Jr. does. Yeah. But that being said, if you were looking for the fairway pick of wide receivers, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah. Like if you do not want to mess it up, I completely understand it, and Amon-Ra is your guy.
For sure. And I guess my worry too with Amon-Ra, last year, his best catch rate he's had since he entered the league. He had his second lowest yards per reception, but his highest touchdowns. So it's, if the efficiency comes down on catch rate and touchdowns, but the yards per reception stays the same, we could see a little bit of dip, which honestly for me probably still is going to have him as a top 8 wide receiver. It's just that's what keeps me from putting him ahead of guys like Puka and Malik Neighbors. Moving on to the B tier. This, you mentioned this in the audio podcast. This might be where we get some, what are you doing? And to be honest, you could call this the A.5 tier if you really want, right? I think these guys are a half step down, just kind of like I thought the A tier was a half step down. I think the S and B tier are a full tier apart for sure, maybe a tier and a half, but these guys are really close. We can nitpick when we're this high up, and these guys just have more reason for us to nitpick than the guys ahead of them. But we're pretty consensus on these. Drake London, both of our wide receiver 9. AJ Brown, both of our wide receiver 10. You have T. Higgins as your wide receiver 11. I have Ladd as my wide receiver 11, and then T as my wide receiver 12, and you have Ladd as your wide receiver 12. So they all fit. I mean, they're all 9 through 12. Pretty consensus for us. Starting with Drake London, wide receiver 5 last year. 100 receptions, 158 targets, 1,271 yards, 9 touchdowns. We've talked about Drake London a lot so far this year, it feels like. And it's because, for me, I think he's going to be extremely good. And I do think he could be in this A tier by week 4. We're like, he should have been a little bit higher. But that's why I said, I think for me, this is like a half step down. This is not a full tier break. If you want to loop some of these guys in, more than welcome. Is there any reason to hesitate on Drake London this year, Ty, or are you kind of all systems go for him?
All systems go. The question then you have to ask really is, if it's all systems go, then why is he not in the A tier? Why is he not talked about in the tier ahead of him? And I honestly think it's because he has a Bijan Robinson problem.
Yeah.
Like, I know that Amon-Ra has Jameer, right? Like, I know that Amon-Ra has Jahmyr Gibbs, but like, that's really about it. Like, Bijan himself had over 350 touches versus all of those guys, alpha guys that can absolutely get 150 targets. Like, there's a path for them to get that. I know Drake London is coming off a year where he was just peppered with targets. He had 158 last year. But how much of that is, I mean, just 18 alone from Michael Penix and 13. And so I wonder if it was a simplified offense the last 3 games where we're like, gosh, this, if that's what we get next year, then he can absolutely crack the A tier. But I think more playbook, a broader offense, I think is the best way to say it. Drake London, still a very good player. Like, don't hear what we're not saying. Like, Drake London is still going to be worth it in fantasy. But I think you and I would both say we just need a little convincing. We need to hear the arguments for what the true upside is for Drake London to crack that A tier.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm probably ready to put him in the A tier, but he is, for me, he will go as far as Michael Penix takes him. So it's a bet on Penix as well as London. So that's what just keeps me a little further. Whereas, I don't know. And that maybe we're nitpicking too much with Drake London. Maybe we don't have a firm enough reason to keep him out, but it just feels like there's just a little bit of separation between the two. This next guy, AJ Brown, you talked about Drake London having a Bijan problem. AJ Brown's got a team problem. He's got Saquon and Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts can't throw, but I'm saying Jalen Hurts is 10 to 15 rushing touchdowns a game. And then he's got a defense that keeps their lead so they don't have to throw the ball. Like, it's all around, all accumulated at once. I think, and Philly fans, this is where, don't yell at us, I think AJ Brown's a top 5 wide receiver talent in the NFL. I think he is unbelievably talented, but they just don't need him in the same way these other teams need their alpha wide receivers, because the rest of their team has just proven over and over that they are so good. Last year, 16.7 fantasy points per game, targets down, yards down, touchdowns were still, I mean, that's what he does, is score touchdowns. But it really is just the fact that he only had 3 games with double-digit targets. Right? That just makes me a little bit nervous compared to the rest of the guys that we could see weeks where he disappears. Or maybe not disappears, but he had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks where he had less than 13 PPR fantasy points, which is my wide receiver one, hurts me a little bit. So do you have those same concerns with AJ Brown? Or where do you stand on him, I guess?
I came across a great thread from Rich Rebar over on Twitter today. I will just give you the teaser of his initial tweet. Regardless of the tush push surviving, we should anticipate Jalen Hurts to have a larger runway through the air in 2025. And he backs it up with a ton of good stats. Like, the very first one he uses, he had AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert on the field for 18% of his dropbacks.
Really? That's it?
That's it.
That's pretty wild.
Brown and Smith were on the field together for only 58% of his dropbacks.
Jeez.
Partially a Saquon effect, but there were some injuries that this team dealt with as well. I think, again, everyone's healthy. He talks about a schedule bump as well. That's true. You're going to be playing a first place schedule. And the most shocking thing, first half of the games, Hurts averaged 17 dropbacks per game, 14th. Second half of games, only 11, 36th. Like, this team just full on relied on Saquon Barkley. And they can do that again this year. But in a tougher schedule with everyone healthy, maybe you're going to need to distribute the ball around a little bit more. And if that's the case, AJ Brown might have a nice little bounce back after what felt like a disappointing year last year.
Yeah. And I think that's the tough part, is it really is like, if AJ Brown's wide receiver 4 at the end of the year, am I surprised? No, I'm not. It's not shocking at all. Like, I still think he's got top 5 upside, but I think that's really what this tier is. I don't see any of these guys challenging for the wide receiver 1 overall spot. I think there's a path for all the guys in A tier. I just don't see that for AJ Brown, just because of, even if Saquon takes a little step back, even if the defense takes a little step back, even if Jalen Hurts doesn't rush for as much touchdowns, you're still just kind of coming back to elite instead of one of a kind rushing offense, which is similar to like what Baltimore has. So that's where I am for that.
So real quick, I will use this as a transition to one of the guys that we'll talk about next. Back to Drake London for like 10 seconds. The guy is just not a threat after the catch. The dude was ranked 33rd in yards after the catch per reception of any player with a target share of 20% or more. That's not great. And for a target guy like Drake London, you kind of need the yards here, okay?
Yep.
Because you got the targets, you got the receptions, the yards just didn't back it up. And then you can say the same thing for T. Higgins, who was actually just one spot ahead of him of any player with a target share of 20% or more. Like T. Higgins, I don't want to say is benefited from the fact that he's in a Cincinnati offense, but because of how, but that's really why. Like, yes, he's still got injury problems that he deals with every single year, but you said it recently. We finally saw the breakthrough for T. Higgins. We finally saw him kind of crack into that top 10 echelon where we were always asking, is it going to happen this year? Will it happen this year? And it finally did last year. So again, for the same reasons why, you could be a little down on Jamar Chase coming off a Triple Crown year because maybe the defense is a little better, that they don't need the offense to play hero ball all the time. But we know what the ceiling is with the Cincinnati offense. And if we hit that ceiling again, T. Higgins is then a top 10 receiver in points per game again.
Definitely. So you took T, I'll take Ladd since I have him one spot higher. You want to talk about a yards after the catch kind of guy, Ladd McConkey. When he gets the ball after the catch, he either breaks every tackle or he dies. Like, I mean, that's literally what it is with. I mean, he's a smaller guy. I think it was a hate. I don't remember who said it. It might have been. God, I don't remember who said it. Someone said it where it's like every time he gets up, it looks like he's fighting for his life because he just gets absolutely smacked when he's out there. But when you're Justin Herbert's number one wide receiver, I feel like you're pretty safe because he's a gunslinger. Yeah. He is. I mean, he gets it out there. 112 targets last season, 82 receptions, almost 1,200 yards. I know they bring in Trey Harris. I'm not convinced Trey Harris, especially year one, is an absolute difference maker. And I think even if he is phenomenal, him and Ladd aren't going to play the same role, right? He's not coming in to take Ladd's spot. He's coming in to take Quentin Johnston's spot, if anything. So that's where I think he's okay. And you saw it in the playoffs. And as the year went on, it just became the Ladd show more and more and more and more. 123, 83, 117, 58, 87, 94, 95. That's the yards per game, yards each game for his last 7. So, I mean, he's just racking up yards, racking up receptions. Feels like he could be Amon-Ra-ish for this Chargers offense, which is a pretty good role to have for sure. Ty, I don't know if the people notice, but we've only covered 12 wide receivers, and we only have 2 tiers left, and we're going to 39. So you better get ready for these next 2 tiers, but we're going to take a quick break. And we're going to hear from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100.
We are back. We're going to just dive right into the C tier here because we got 9 players in this C tier. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill, Marvin Harrison, Tataroa McMillan, and Mike Evans. And Ty, this does feel like a clean tier break here for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but it feels pretty definitive to go from B to C. Whereas we talked about with the S through B, it's kind of like it was murky, murky at best of when to break these tiers. this feels pretty good. And, there's going to be some people here who are going to be, are you seriously saying that JSN, the wide receiver 9 overall last year, doesn't belong? Yeah, I am, because he averaged less than 15 fantasy points per game. And I'm not convinced that going from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold isn't a downgrade. I love Sam Darnold, but I really like Geno Smith. I understand, you lose DK, you lose, what's his name? Tyler Lockett. But you're going from an offense coordinator that threw the ball a ton to one that's going to favor the run a little bit more, favor some play action. And then on top of it all, I'm not saying Cooper Kupp is a threat to JSN, but it kind of stinks that they brought in a guy who's going to be pretty exclusively in the slot when you're a slot wide receiver. So I know I painted a pretty pessimistic view of JSN. Can you give us a little bit on the upside for JSN here?
He is by far the best weapon in the passing game for the Seattle offense. And I think when it comes to Clint Kubiak and what we saw last year in New Orleans, I don't want to say it's a wash because of everything, because there's still stuff to learn about how Kubiak runs an offense. But we all had questions about Chris Olave going into last year. And it did take a little bit for him to get going. But then, gosh, it was like perfect storm at the wrong time for New Orleans. Because Chris Olave comes off the game, 8 receptions, 10 targets, 87 yards. And you're like, okay, like Chris Olave's kind of found his role here in this Kubiak offense. Next game, Derek Carr gets hurt. And then the game after that, Chris Olave gets hurt. And then everything seems to be back to normal. 8 catches, 14 targets, 107 yards. And then the very next game, Derek Carr throws him a hospital ball, and then we don't see Chris Olave for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sit here and say it's a 1-for-1 that Chris Olave is kind of the example for JSN. But Clint Kubiak is not he's not blind to the fact that there is I almost said elite talent, and that could have gotten the comments going. There is a very good talent in JSN in this wide receiver room, and you're going to try to do whatever you can to get him the ball. Yeah, Cooper Kupp does murky up some things in terms of how they'll line up and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you do kind of have to trust that somebody's going to establish themselves in this wide receiver room, because if no one does, the Seattle offense is quite literally going nowhere then. So again, how you kind of let it off, JSN, you might not agree that he's at the front of this C tier. Let me just clarify this. Anyone in this C tier you can rank in any order, we won't have a problem with it. This is just our preference of how we would go about it.
For sure. The next guy, Davante Adams. Some people might be a little surprised. Obviously we aren't if we made the rankings, but he's my wide receiver 13, your wide receiver 16. And Ty, here's a little stat for you. Before week 15, which was the week that Sean McVay just decided that Cooper Kupp doesn't exist anymore and stopped throwing him the ball, Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 5 in points per game with 18.4 through week 14, which is shocking. I mean, that I was like, what? You know who was wide receiver 4 in points per game during the same stretch? Puka Nacua with 19. So if you're trying to tell me, I don't know if they can both exist, they can. They can both exist. And Davante Adams showed last year, you don't have to like everything that went down with him and Rodgers and getting out of Vegas, but he's still pretty good at football. He's still pretty stinking good at football. And him, Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Sean McVay, I think they're going to have a little bit of fun. They're giving him at least $20 million this year. So they're going to use him in the offense. I'm hot and bothered by Davante Adams. I don't know if you're like pumping the brakes a little bit. I know I'm the exact opposite of the way I just talked about JSN, even though I have JSN only one spot below him. But I'm taking a lot of Davante Adams in my early best ball drafts.
I get it I'll be honest. Like Devontae Adams showed no signs of regression or slowing down last year, despite the team change and all that stuff. And Devontae Adams does free up Puka Nacua to kind of be the 1A, if not the one in this offense.
Mm-hmm.
But Devontae Adams is so good that the decoy that he could be used for may not matter at the end of the day because he's still so good that he won't be locked up or that he won't be shut down. He will still be able to get open. The one thing you do have to say is just that, like, yeah, he doesn't have the advantage of a quarterback that knows him or an offense that can only go through him, or that he is the best talent on that team. And I don't want to open that up to be like, is Devontae Adams the best wide receiver in football? That's not what I'm trying to say. But he doesn't have the advantage that he has had at previous destinations. He has the best situation here with the Rams, but that doesn't mean that he's got an advantage over anyone else because of that.
Yeah. Next, we're going to talk about a guy that is very glad that Devontae Adams is out of town. That is Garrett Wilson. He goes from Aaron Rodgers to Justin Fields, and I'll let you guys argue if that is a downgrade and upgrade at the quarterback position. But Garrett Wilson has spoken very highly of Justin Fields. They're old college teammates. We've talked about him a couple times, that is literally just him. He is it as far as wide receiver pass catchers in this Jets offense. So even if you're like, but the Justin Fields is going to throw a lot. Okay. If Justin Fields throws the ball 170 times, Garrett Wilson's going to get 160 targets. So like that's kind of where we're at. I'm as wide receiver 16, you have him as 14. How good can Garrett Wilson be this season? I think that's just what it comes down to with Justin. Could we see a DJ Moore-esque wide receiver 6 finish from Garrett Wilson? Is that in the cards, or are you a little bit lower than that?
Probably a little bit lower, I'll be honest. I think what it comes down to is just scoring. He can be a volume guy. Just a matter of how many times are you going to score on those opportunities. And like, I literally saw an hour ago on Wednesday, May 21st. We are recording this at 5:45 Central Time. An hour ago, and I should say the tweet came out an hour ago. This was much earlier in the day. But Aaron Glenn was asked on what he's learning about Garrett Wilson, and he goes, give him the ball as much as possible. Give him the ball as much as possible. Yep. That's it. It's like, cool. But are you going to score? So there's nothing wrong with the volume play, but that does cap your ceiling. And I think anywhere in this like 10 to 15 range makes the most sense.
For sure. I think I'd agree. The next player, Rashee Rice, for me, he's the hardest because it's just how healthy.
How does it work? Yeah. How does it work with Worthy?
Because what we saw at the beginning of last season, before he got hurt, was league winning. I mean, that's really the way to describe it. The dude had 64 points in 3 games. And so it's just, can he keep it up? Does Travis Kelce take another setback? What is it like with Worthy now? What's the running back room look like? Are they going to try and speed it up again in Kansas City? There's so many question marks where I'm taking the bet on Rashee Rice more often than not. I'm taking the bet that it's going to look somewhat similar to what we saw last year, and that he is going to be Patrick Mahomes' guy. I don't know if you're more hesitant, or where you stand on him, but for me, I'm looking at it in drafts and going, I think I'm going to take the bet. I'm going to take the gamble that he is Mahomes' guy.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this where there will be kind of a feeling out process when you have Rashee and Worthy and Kelce all together, but there is a world where there actually is very little overlap here. And a lot of people could say, well, a lot of what Worthy did last year when he was thriving was what Rashee Rice does. Also very true. So this could very literally be a, like, defenses have to guess, is it going to be Rashee Rice or is it going to be Worthy? And that's going to leave us fantasy players a little frustrated because it's not going to be Rashee Rice all the time. But that being said, again, in a world where there is very little overlap, and you've got Xavier Worthy that can work across the short parts of the field and even be the deep threat. And then you've got Rashee Rice to kind of clean up in the intermediate parts of the field. Travis Kelce can still find his way over the middle of the field then. Like, there's a world where this all can work out, but it's just a matter of, like, does it all go right? That's the question you have to ask. So there's a pathway. I think a lot of people are kind of buying in on the fact that Rashee Rice is the best receiver in this wide receiver room. Worthy is by far the fastest, but that doesn't mean that he's the best between, Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown and the rest of them. So again, Rashee Rice, again, kind of an enigma, kind of an interesting one. You may be completely out. That's fine. I think you and I would both say, like, yeah, we would buy in on that. This all works out.
Yeah, I agree. This next guy, Terry McLaurin, he is, you want to talk about consistent? Since 2020, he has not had less than 77 receptions. He has not had more than 87 receptions. He has not had less than 1,000 yards. He has not had more than 1,200 yards. So you ask, what was the difference then? Why was he the wide receiver 7 after being wide receiver 20, 25, 14, and 31? Well, because his career high was 7 touchdowns. And during that stretch, his high was 5 touchdowns. He then had 13 receiving touchdowns last year. And now they bring in Deebo Samuel. So should we be worried about regression for Terry McLaurin? Or are you kind of thinking maybe touchdowns come down a little, but I think passing volume, some of the training wheels we saw early on for Jaden Daniels kind of come off, or passing volume goes up?
I maybe passing volume goes up. The only thing is, like you said, it's the touchdowns. If the touchdowns go down, volume stays the same. There's a world where Terry McLaurin kind of automatically regresses because of that. But like Terry McLaurin last year, wide receiver 16 in points per game. I think you and I are both saying it's going to look different, but we're going to expect the same kind of results as Terry McLaurin being the one in this offense. Mm-hmm. And passing volume goes up. Jaden Daniels maybe doesn't run as much, or again, you can come up with any kind of scenario, but Terry McLaurin, it may look different than what it did last year, but still being the one in this offense that we are expecting to be among the best in the league, that has to mean something for Terry.
For sure. And that's really what it comes down to. He's my wide receiver 19, you're wide receiver 15. Next, we got Tyreek Hill, my wide receiver 18, wide receiver 20. This is just, we have no idea who Tyreek Hill is this year. If he is 2022, 2023 Tyreek Hill, we look stupid. If he is what we saw last year, he's probably going to be in this range, maybe a little bit lower. And then you got the Tua question mark on top of it. That's kind of where it's all coming from, because last year he didn't look like Tyreek Hill. He didn't look like he was running full speed. He didn't look like he wanted to get hit. He didn't look like he was wanting to make plays. And obviously you have all the off the field issues going on with it. What, if you're going to give me a percent chance, what do you think the percent chance is that Tyreek Hill returns to 2023 form?
I'll give it like a 30% chance.
Yeah.
I do think that last year's wrist injury played a big part in Tyreek's production. Yeah. That being said, if he's 100% healthy and all the off-field stuff doesn't carry over to the on-field stuff, like Tyreek Hill could be a top 15 wide receiver. It's not going to surprise anyone. And I don't want to say it's going to go back to what we have known Tyreek Hill to be, which is that like top 5 wide receiver and absolute like game breaker type receiver in fantasy, but you still have to think that Miami is going to want Tyreek Hill to kind of be their guy in the offense. The other piece of this that I'm a little kind of iffy on, you could say, last year, like this offense went through Devon Achane
and Jonnu Smith
and Jonnu Smith, but it was almost kind of in not in spite of, but because Tyreek and Jalen Waddle didn't do enough. Mm-hmm. So again, there's a world where this offense can kind of play out where it is very pro Tyreek Hill, pro Jalen Waddle, or it's more of what we saw last year of Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting for sure. It's just, I don't know. He's such a so many different outcomes that can come with it, because last year, wide receiver 33 in points per game in PPR, didn't have 1,000 receiving yards. Obviously, Tua missed a lot of time, so that plays into it, but not what you would expect when you drafted Tyreek Hill. Next, we have Marvin Harrison Jr., and he might be, I think, our biggest divide, or one of our biggest divides of any wide receiver. I have him at 17. You have him at 22. For me, I'm expecting a sophomore leap. I am betting on the talent of Marvin Harrison, because I know when you look at the offense, you go, what has changed? Nothing. So why are we expecting something different? For me, I'm expecting him to grow more as a pro, knowing, hey, he's got a dad who is pretty darn good at football, who can kind of help coach him along. He was supposed to be borderline generational coming out. I'm betting on that. That's why I have him higher. You have him a little bit lower. Is it because of there's just nothing that has changed? I mean, 22 is still pretty good for where he finished last year, right? I mean, he was outside the top 30 wide receivers in points per game. So
Try top 40.
Top 40. So, right. I mean, you're still betting on him higher, but what's holding you back from being all in on Marv?
I just don't think that this team is going to look at him or utilize him as kind of the major target getter. And that's frustrating, because I think we see the talent that is Marvin Harrison Jr., that if you move him across the line of scrimmage, across the formation, this is a guy that can get open on every part of the field. But if you're just going to pigeonhole him to being just an outside guy that has to beat, all different types of coverages, when you don't necessarily possess a ton of speed, we're kind of, like, you can still take a step forward, like you said, and improve, but then you're going to hit the limitation of the ceiling of this offense, just kind of holding you back a little bit. So this is me. And again, like, I have him as my wide receiver 22, 42 last year, wide receiver 42 in points per game. So we are both expecting a step forward for him. But for right now, where the general consensus is on Marvin Harrison as the wide receiver 14 in best ball drafts over on Underdog, like early third round, I still can't get behind it, because I think there's too much risk with that kind of price tag.
Definitely. And I understand, like, you are, like, I am baking in a big jump, and I'm still taking him because I think he can even exceed that, where I understand that if you're baking in this jump, you're kind of like, this might be the ceiling this year. And I totally get that. Next, we have Tedderell McMillan, our first rookie, our only rookie, C tier or higher, going to the Carolina Panthers. You have him at 18. I have him down at 22. So a similar gap that we have for Marv here. I understand Carolina got a little better. I'm a little concerned just about him taking over right away in this offense, and just this offense hitting his stride where we saw them leave off last year. That's my concern. I guess, how are you viewing Tet when you're entering into let's just, for best ball drafts right now?
Best ball drafts right now, I think he is, I don't want to say he's a value, but towards the end of, or I shouldn't say he's not, it's the beginning of the fourth round, wide receiver 22. I'm very much okay with that, knowing that it could be a slow start for Tedderell McMillan, because rarely do we ever see, obviously the Malik Neighbors and Justin Jeffersons and all that stuff. Like, they can hit the ground running. Jamar Chase, like, they can hit the ground running. Ted McMillan may take a little bit, because I think the role that he's going to play is that dominant kind of outside guy.
Mm-hmm.
That will take a little bit to get used to. But I think Ted McMillan can eventually get used to, get up to speed, I should say. Dave Canales is familiar with this kind of weapon on the outside. Mike Evans, who we will talk about right after this. like he will help him along as well. So I fully understand that there could be some build up for Ted McMillan that it will take a little bit, but I think once it gets going, it's going to be very, very good so that he can kind of end in this, early 20s, late teens kind of range.
Yeah. And like you said, we're going Mike Evans here. He has, talk about Terry McLaurin. I mean, this dude's been kind of the same way. 70 receptions, 1,000 to 1,100 yards. We keep saying he can't do it again. He can't. Oh, he had Tom Brady. He can't do it. Oh, okay. He had Baker. It's just 1 year. I mean, it's 13, 14, 6, 13, 11. That's his touchdown totals for the last 5 seasons. When does it end, Ty? Like, when are we going to get this break from Mike Evans? He was tied with Devontae Adams for wide receiver 10 in points per game last year. Is this the year it falls off, or is it kind of like almost Derrick Henry-esque of just keep betting on it until it doesn't happen again?
Honestly, I think for Mike Evans, everyone's going to keep kind of predicting. It's almost like Derrick Henry-esque, except Derrick Henry now like is full on like into the second round, like early second round of at least best ball drafts. But people are going to always try to predict the downfall of Mike Evans. And so that's going to bake into the cost of Mike Evans to a point where it's like, you know what? It's understandable. Like I will continue to take the chance on him because you're not spending premium draft capital. You're not getting him in the first 3 rounds, or you're not taking him in the first 3 rounds. Now that depends that again, when we get closer to the season and then you start drafting and your home leagues and whatnot. But you can cautiously approach Mike Evans, and I get it because the guy is again just aging right in front of our eyes. He's now 31. He'll turn 32 during the season. So we are kind of approaching that kind of age cliff. But even if it slows down, it's not like Mike Evans is going to completely stop or that it's going to completely fall apart and that he's only going to be getting like 80 targets and not even going to crack like 800 yards. It's going to be a slow decline. So I'm okay with Mike Evans. I wondered if I put him lower, but I keep coming back to the fact that it's like, it's not going to all fall. It's not all going to break down all at once.
Definitely. And here it is. If you've been watching on YouTube, you've been waiting for something because you're looking and you're going, we're out of tiers here. And you promised me 39 and we're at 21 here. So we got 18 guys in our final tier. We're not doing this just to be funny. I mean, this is genuinely, we're going through this and where the heck do you break this at? Because, I mean, do you break it after JMO? Do you break it after Ridley? Do you break it? And the reason we did 39 and not 40, because some of you are why did you not pick a round number? It's because our 40th wide receiver didn't fit in this tier. That's why. I'm going to wait for our draft guide and you can find out who 40. It was Deebo Samuel. But he didn't quite fit in this tier for us. The rest of these guys did. Xavier Worthy here, Ty. You're higher, so I'll let you talk on him. Why is he at the beginning of our D tier? And why isn't he in the C tier?
Probably because the peaks and valleys. Not to fall back on what I talked about with Worthy when we went over our second year wide receivers, but there is a world where again we're going to see some really high highs, where we're going to see some really low lows, and to just keep it as simple as possible, it could be a Worthy game one week and it may not be the other. If they try to use him more downfield, we may get a slower start to the season again because they're just not connecting as much as you would want them to. So there's risk with Worthy. There's upside as well, but like the risk is that like Worthy can find himself closer to 30 than he can to 20.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that. DJ Moore, he's been a wide receiver 2 pretty much his entire career. He had 2023 we talked about it was the wide receiver 6. Other than that, since his rookie year has not finished lower than the wide receiver 25. Hasn't finished higher than the wide receiver 16. Could Ben Johnson unlock him? Maybe. But at the same time, they brought in Luther Burden, they brought in Colston Loveland, so it's not quite as clear what his role is going to be, not quite as clear where the targets are always going to come from. So there's just question marks, but at the same time, we have to recognize the consistency of DJ Moore. Feels like a Terry McLaurin, just with more targets or more target competition going around, is essentially how I'm viewing DJ Moore. Cortland Sutton, I don't want to call him a gross name in this in this tier, but he doesn't get you excited. However, Ty, I don't really know if we can knock him much lower. Can we, or is he just, this is kind of just where he belongs?
Yeah, probably where he belongs. It's like, it is what it is. There's nothing too exciting to get, or there's nothing to get too excited about, but you have to understand just situation and all that stuff. And there he is.
Yeah, that's kind of where it is. We're expecting probably 80-ish, 90, 80-ish receptions, probably 1,000 yards, and maybe he hits double-digit touchdowns. And it's kind of like you have variance on either side of that. It's going to fall on this tier.
Mm-hmm.
Devonta Smith, I love Devonta Smith as much as the next guy, but we talked about it pretty similar with AJ Brown. Of this team doesn't throw as much, and if they do, AJ Brown's the first guy it goes to, and then it goes to Devonta Smith. It's just a small passing pie. I think they're both unbelievably talented wide receivers. I think they're one of the top duos in the NFL. But it's just how much upside can he truly have when you have a defense, the way they play defense, and Saquon Barkley in town. I don't know if you have anything to add on Devonta Smith, but it's just kind of like, we like him a lot. I just don't know how much higher you can push him.
Let's just hope they throw the ball more.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. We got a rookie. We got another rookie. Woo! Travis Hunter here. He is my wide receiver 27, your wide receiver 24. The goal, obviously, is that he's more of a full-time wide receiver in fantasy. Are you comfortable taking him as your wide receiver 2 in drafts? Or is he more of I would like him as my wide receiver 3 kind of guy?
I think by season's end, he'll be a wide receiver 2, and you're going to look back and go like, why didn't I buy him in as a wide receiver 2? I just think that there's going to be some growing pains with Travis Hunter, and look, like, the dude is a phenomenal talent. So I don't want to sound like we're downing the talent. Like, literally go check out like our wide receiver comps video before the draft. We were singing the praises of Travis Hunter. But this is the first time where he's going to be full-time offense with some part-time defense. At least that's, again, no one knows exactly how it's going to play out. But when you're Jacksonville, you trade up to 2, and then you come out in press conferences and you talk about Travis Hunter on offense. I think it leads you to believe that it'll be full-time offense and part-time defense. So with that being the case, again, growing pains, some time to adjust. Yeah, we believe in Liam Cohen. And that's why I say by year's end, you will say like, oh yeah, duh. Like that was the easiest wide receiver 2 to kind of bet on. But you won't be saying that maybe the first 4 weeks when we're only getting 6-7 targets and we're only putting up like 40-50 yards.
Yeah, no, and that's 100% what it comes down to. DK Metcalf, then it feels like we have 2 paths for DK Metcalf. Either he gets Aaron Rodgers and he's probably at the higher end of this tier, or we get Mason Rudolph and he's at the lower end of this tier. Where,
dare I say, Will Howard?
Ooh, I mean, Will Howard too, right? And then it's probably like he grossly finishes at the end of this tier. That's kind of what, even with Rodgers, I'm not convinced in an Arthur Smith system that we see him jump up into the next tier, that we see him, challenge as a top 15 wide receiver. Maybe he does, right? I mean, he's an extremely talented wide receiver. Do you see that kind of upside, or are you just like, even with Aaron Rodgers, I'm not super excited about DK Metcalf?
You have to be somewhat excited if he were to have Aaron Rodgers, just because it's substantially better than what it looks like right now. But
yes,
I think we do kind of have to keep in perspective. It's an Arthur Smith offense, and you can have success in an Arthur Smith offense as a wide receiver, but that doesn't automatically like throw you into the biggest names in fantasy. Like, it'll be good for an Arthur Smith offense. That doesn't exactly mean it's the best for fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Next, we have Jameson Williams. You expressed that Jameson has been getting better each season. Do you see another step forward, or my worry is he's kind of capped at where he is because of Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, the way that this offense kind of wants to run the ball?
I guess it's kind of the experiment that if he does take the step, someone's going to have to take a little smaller piece of the pie.
Yeah.
That is a realistic possibility. Like that can happen. But at the same time, with a coordinator change, can that kind of, halt the development? Absolutely can. Where the new play caller, I believe his name is John Morton, Joe, whatever, Morton. I believe that's his last name, and that's what I'll go by. He may have seen what Jameson did last year and said, that's all that I need. I don't need anything more. And if that happens, well, then Jameson Williams can find himself again in this just large tier of players. But we do need to say that Jameson Williams did kind of break out last year, and he was the wide receiver 26 in points per game. Yep. And that's kind of where we have him right about here. Like, we may be a little bit lower, and that's maybe a little too harsh in the sense that, like, we're kind of double counting the coordinator change in that sense. But I think there are a lot of different ways to look at this Lions offense and how Jameson Williams can impact that offense. And it's just going to be a matter of if you buy in on it. And I think in certain scenarios, we would be okay with it, but it's not going to be a smash pick anytime that we see him come around in our drafts.
Yeah, definitely. We got Jerry Jeudy next. 1,229 yards last year. 6th in receiving yards in the NFL. That's hard to argue with, but then you bake in the fact that he doesn't have a quarterback, and then you're kind of like, So I guess the question is he the wide receiver one? Like, are we ready to say he's solidified as wide receiver one in Cleveland? And then kind of the follow-up is, does that matter? I think he is. I think it matters enough that it keeps him in this tier. Mm-hmm. But similar to kind of DK, for me at least, I don't see him breaking out of this tier. And as long as he's the one, he'll probably finish, he's going to finish inside the top 40 wide receivers.
Yeah. And you really want Joe Flacco to play the entire year.
Yes, please.
Which is a wild statement.
Yeah. It definitely is. I mean, honestly, it's probably him or Sanders at least, because Sanders, is going to go out there with confidence and air it out a little. So, I mean, either you want hopefully 1 or 4 on the depth chart. The other 2 options might not be so great for fantasy. Rome Odunze is next. We've talked about him a ton. If you didn't get to see me and Ty talk about him on our year 2 wide receiver video that we had last week on Tuesday, go check it out. We both really think he's a great value right now. In your drafts, going as the wide receiver 35, getting Ben Johnson. He's going to play on the outside. He's going to see a lot of snaps. Still believe in the talent. Anything you want to add about Rome?
If he takes a step, I mean, he could quite literally catapult himself if he takes a step, and with the upgraded play caller with Ben Johnson.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that he could look like he could be one of the best values in this. Obviously, we're projecting into it. He feels similar to where Marv, but we haven't baked in the jump up, right? We haven't baked in him actually getting better this year. Jalen Waddle's next. I like Jalen Waddle a lot. It's just, again, it's the bet on Tua. And then it's also the fact that he's going to be the third option in this offense. That's what it comes down to. He's extremely talented. But can Tua stay healthy? You're betting on that. And then can he find enough fantasy value as the third option, behind Devon Achane and Tyreek Hill? And that's where it gets a little iffy. George Pickens, I do want to talk about a little bit more, because new situation. Is this finally the George Pickens year, right? We have some George Pickens truthers who have been banging the table for him to get the targets. He's probably going to see some, only 103 last year, under 1,000 receiving yards. Had 1,140 receiving yards the season before, but he's still yet to see 65 receptions in a season. Is this the year? Is this a George Pickens year going in needing a new contract next year? Or I don't know. Where do you stand on George Pickens, Ty?
He's going to be a nice little flex play. Because I think here's how you should think of it. If you think that CeeDee Lamb is going to be the dominant target getter, that has to limit the upside of George Pickens.
Yeah.
It has to. Unless George Pickens scores double-digit touchdowns and is getting like 17 yards per reception and cracks 1,000 yards on just such a small volume, which, sure, it can happen, but it can happen for everybody. So I like Pickens. I've been a fan of him really ever since he came out of Georgia, which is kind of funny because the running joke is that I don't like Georgia players. But George Pickens, this is the best situation that he's had. Best quarterback play by a mile. So why can't he at least be somewhat relevant then for fantasy? So look, I like George Pickens, but if you're buying in because his ceiling to you is potentially top 20, that comes at the detriment of CeeDee Lamb. And if you think that CeeDee Lamb is going to, again, jump back into that elite, and look, 150 targets is elite, but 180 targets like it was in 23.
Yeah.
And you're going to buy in on Pickens being a top 20 guy, you were likely saying that Dallas is like a top 10 scoring offense. And I just can't follow you there.
He might be the definition this season of the better and best ball kind of guy, where he's got top 15, top 12 upside on a weekly basis, but he's also got outside the top 56 wide receivers on a weekly basis kind of a player. So it'd be interesting to kind of watch the ups and downs there. Calvin Ridley feels like Cortland Sutton on a worse team. That's kind of where I'm at. He's going to see targets. He'll probably see red zone targets. We have no idea how good Cam Ward's going to be. He's on a significant, Titans are significantly worse than the Broncos are right now. So that's where he stands. Chris Godwin, another interesting one, was on fire last year. Wide receiver 2 points per game. He only played 7, but Liam Cohen gone, coming back from injury. Emeka Ibuka obviously being drafted in the first round. He did, they signed him to $20 million a year, so they have to believe in him somewhat. I see a world where he ends up as a top 15 wide receiver if he's healthy because of what we saw last year. I see that world. Do you see that, or you think that he might be a little too optimistic there?
I think it really comes down to where you think he is with his injury. And it's not a knee injury, but it was a scary looking ankle injury. I don't recommend going and watching the clip of it on YouTube. But to be completely honest, in the sense that we were talking about, who was it? Who could be the steal? Oh, Rome Odunze. He could be the steal of wide receivers in this tier. Chris Godwin could absolutely be the same. A little bit different reason. Not as youthful, and not needing the step forward. It's really just the bet on the injury recovery. I understand it. And for me, I'm just a little worried that it's going to take some time. But at the same time, very similar to Travis Hunter, then in the sense that by year's end, I'm going to be kicking myself going, gosh darn it. I should have, I'm counting too much on the build up and the ramp up for Chris Godwin. And I've just kind of forgot that when he's going to be fully healthy then and at full speed, he is kind of, I don't want to say the wide receiver one in that Tampa wide receiver room, but he makes that offense go.
Yeah. Definitely, he definitely does. Chris Olave next. Yeah, it's the injury concern. It's Tyler Shuck. It's it's the Saints are gonna be hot garbage this year. Kind of feels like he's in that Calvin Ridley, Cortland, and Sutton or Calvin Ridley conversation. Honestly,
Mhm.
of he's the best they got, but is the best they got good enough to move him any higher? I
Yep.
like Chris Olave a lot. I don't feel excited when I'm drafting him. That's
Look, con injury history, one
Yes.
more bad hit and it could be done.
Yep.
Pro, Kellen Moore.
Yep.
Con, Tyler Shuck, or Spencer Rattler, for all we know.
Yeah, could be Spencer Rattler.
So that's 2 cons to 1 pro. That leaves you with this spot.
There you go. That's about as good as you can put it. Zay Flowers. We're not going to spend a lot of time on Zay Flowers. We've talked about Zay
Move
Flowers.
on. Sorry, he didn't deserve that.
His situation is not great for fantasy. We've held that stance. We're not going to change it. You can check out our year 3 breakout wide receivers. You can check out our worst picks in dynasty drafts. You can check out our dynasty sells video. We talk about him pretty extensively in all 3. So we'll kind of leave it at that. Juwan Jennings should be higher in terms on this tier. But I misplaced him and was too lazy to move everybody else back. So he is right behind DK Metcalf. Or no, right behind Jameson Williams in our rankings. But he kind of got the short end of the stick and moved back because yours truly put him in the wrong spot. But he does belong in this tier. He is our highest ranked San Francisco wide receiver, which might ruffle some feathers. But dude was awesome last year. He played a lot more than Ricky Pearsall. He's not coming off an ACL tear like Brandon Ayuk.
Well, hold on. Why did he play more than Ricky Pearsall last year?
Ricky Pearsall got shot, but
That's a
Brandon
pretty
Ayuk,
important detail.
that is an important detail. You were right. Brandon Ayuk coming off the ACL tear, so that's kind of why he's higher up. But it also feels like this could be where Ricky Pearsall goes. This could be where Brandon Ayuk goes. But at the end of the day, they're all fighting to be the third option in this offense behind George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. And that limits really a lot of upside for all 3 of them. Jacoby Myers, underrated fantasy performer. I mean, this guy deserves his flowers. 0.3 fantasy points less than Garrett Wilson last year, Ty. More fantasy points than Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, Cortland Sutton, Jameson Williams, DJ Moore, Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf. I mean, he's pretty legit. I know they brought in Jack Besh, who I know you love. You think he's, rookie wide receiver 1. So I'm just kidding.
As we talked about Ted McMillan in the seats here already. Nice.
But truthfully, does Jack Besh and the addition of Ashton Genty, does that worry you with Jacoby Myers? Or is he just kind of a guy that, he's going in the mid 40s in best ball drafts? You take him and you got top 36 upside with him.
I'm somewhere between Jerry Jeudy and Juwan Jennings in how we argued for those guys, where like Jerry Jeudy is just kind of the under the radar, not super great offense, but he's still going to produce. So he's still going to crack the top 36. But then from the Juwan Jennings perspective of he's going to be behind Ashton Genty. He's going to be behind Brock Bowers. So the number 3 guy in a Chip Kelly offense. Is that going to work? Yeah, he did get the quarterback upgrade too with Geno Smith. So maybe there's some optimism that despite being the number 3 guy, he can still crack the top 36. But I'm at that point, it may be more so that it's just going to look very different than it was last year, where the dude kind of had like the Deontay Johnson kind of finish to the season, where like Deontay Johnson, first half of the year on Carolina, was all that they had. And then it was like Jacoby Myers like carried that torch then throughout the rest of the year when he's pretty much putting up like 10 targets a game. So there's nothing wrong with Jacoby Myers, but there's not a whole lot that like gets you excited. It's very much just another fairway kind of pick for the D's here.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton-esque.
And
the final guy, Jordan Addison. Might surprise you as a couple Vikings fans. Maybe this is us counteracting our hometown bias a little too much. Wide receiver 23, wide receiver 21 finishes. He has yet to crack 1,000 receiving yards, but you factor in he has Justin Jefferson, rookie quarterback with JJ McCarthy, TJ Hawkinson back fully healthy. I think really that's what's baked into it here at wide receiver 40. And then you have the legal troubles on top of it, where could he miss a couple of games? Anything you want to add on Jordan Addison, or does that kind of sum him up pretty well?
That's really about it. I think once he gets back, there is some potential that he can be a nice little, wide receiver 3 type player for you. But it's just a matter of like, when do we see that? If we see that, like you said, for all the reasons, for all the changes that are coming with this Vikings offense, I don't know. I would rather just have him as my wide receiver 4 than I would drafting him. Again, this is very much on best ball and underdog, but wide receiver 33. So you have to take him as your wide receiver 3. I would rather just have Addison as a wide receiver 4.
Definitely. And that makes sense. Well, thank you for sticking with us for this beast of an episode. We didn't have Lucas, so he didn't really reel us in here. So we went a little long. Ty and I'm laughing a little bit at the end of this because we slowed down in our private chat a couple times. We're like, hey, we got to speed it up. We stopped the episode to talk to each other, saying we got to speed it. We couldn't because we just wanted to talk about these guys so much. So hopefully it was useful to you. We really enjoyed it breaking down.
Hey, real quick, if you're still here watching, like, 1, let us know, but 2, like, you're a real one. Like, we appreciate you.
Yes. 100%. I will personally give you 1% off the draft guide if you are still listening right now, and comment down below. I'm just kidding.
Hello.
Whoa. Yeah, make sure you hit that notification or subscribe. I don't know why I go notification then subscription button, but hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications if you are still listening. We thank you. We do want to hear your comments. Let us know where we were wrong. Let us know where we were right. Next week, let's pull it up real quick. What do we got? We got some fun stuff. We have 6 disastrously bad picks in fantasy drafts and 6 tremendously good picks in fantasy drafts next week. So that should be a lot of fun to talk about. We like those types where we get the good and the bad in 1 week, kind of get to flush it all out. So make sure you stick around for that.
Heels in WWE. Everyone likes being the heel.
We love it. We can't leave without a Thai WWE reference. But
of course.
I am at Camel FFF on the X. Tyler's at Tyler_Plath. We are FFLas on the X. The FFLs on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. Fantasy Football Fellas Shorts on YouTube for a short form content over here. We will see you next week. Deuces.